Hello, this is Ayumu and welcome to my seminar. This is the second video discussing that list from the Chile Grand Tour. If you missed out the previous video, you can find it at the top right corner right now or in the description below. Make sure to check it out after this video. So we have the Yellow White Luster by Julia Brown, who is also known as Panton Shake. If you have seen Julia's list before, then yeah, it's actually about the same, with maybe a little bit of change in ratios in terms of the magic cards, especially because well, I've been testing with Julia, and then she's kind of expecting a best of 3 game. I was expecting a best of 3 game, and so that's why she was stuck with Yellow White Luster, because we only found out there was best of 1 until 2 days before the tournament. So there wasn't really any time to kind of completely test a new deck, and so she just went with Gloom and hope for the best with the magic lines up. So again, let's just go through the cards one by one. Obviously with this list, your kind of main attackers are Gloom and also Knight Glare. We can start with the low cost cards. We got Tin Soldiers right there, which is quite an obvious choice. I think it's kind of in the similar position as the Mecha Wing Duck from the previous list. So just a really cheap spirit for you to summon with quite a decent stat as well, with 3 costs at 5,000, just a really decent blocker. As I said, a lot of the aggro decks, their kind of maximum BP threshold is just 4,000. So keeping your spirit at 5,000 can prevent quite a lot of attacks, and even if they reach 5,000, you're literally trading with them with a cost 0 spirits. And then obviously we got the Hippocampo, very standard card in any yellow decks, very cheap blast, nothing much else to say. And then we got 3 copies of Pegazione, again stable in a really aggro meta. I already explained kind of how well it can do against aggro decks, so I'm not gonna be spend too much time on this card. And then we have 2 copies of Crocodile, just to fit in more slots with the blessed units. Crocodile is sort of one of the kind of cheaper blessed units, even though it kind of needs the soul core to get blessed, and it's only a level 2 effect. But even then, with this deck, you don't really use a lot of soul cores. It's literally just Pegazione and Crocodile. So I think it really depends on the situation, if you want to attack to get the bless effect, or do you want to retain the blockwise exhausted effect. I mean, obviously it definitely depends on what you have in your hand, because if you play stuff like Ice Shield, Flush Stream, Exhaust Nessus, then I think it's kind of fine to try to sacrifice the block effect and then go for the bless instead. And then we have the start of this deck, Knight Aglaya. You might think that when the Gloom is the main card, I mean, obviously it kind of still is. It's the main engine of the deck, but if you want to finish the game, Aglaya is kind of what you want to go for, because it has the effect when you use a magic card against Astro and 3000 BP. The most important part is the Astro and the level 2 Luster, because what you can do is that after you gain Luster, you play a Snow Melting Light. With the Chain Wide effect, you can just refresh Aglaya, and then if you have enough cost, you can just repeat the attack 5 times and your opponent's dead. So it's just a really good finisher in general, and it also means that you don't need a lot of setup, because at the end you need at least 3 cards, so you need 1 Knight Aglaya, you need a Snow Melting Light, and if you want to get the refresh effect, you need a white symbol. So you maybe keep a Pegazione on the field, keep a Wind Gloom on the field, or you have a Steam Power Factory, which also gives a white symbol, and also extra reductions for your magic cards as well. So this is kind of what you have to go for. Honestly, it's not a lot of setup, considering that with Steam Power Factory, it's something that you should have placed down in the early game already. So by the time when you try to finish the game, really the only 2 cards that you want to get are Aglaya and then Snow Melting Light. So and then just with these 2 cards, and not a lot of cost, because if you think of it this way, say you have everything at max reduction, Knight Aglaya 2 cost, 2 costs on it, Snow Melting Light 1 cost. Say you really want to get them down to 0 lives in 1 turn, I mean, obviously you don't because you probably have attacked quite a few times beforehand already. But like, like in like the worst case scenario, let's say it this way, and so there'll be two costs for a layer, two costs on it, and then you need like four costs to refresh four times, which is like a total of eight costs. It's not a lot of costs for like a finisher card. It is pretty damn good, and like obviously because like Aglaya will also gain 3000 for the rest of the turn for every magic card you use. So by the time you use No Melting Light for the fourth time, Aglaya will be like at minimum 16k. You know, they literally can't remove it if like the destruction are like BB based. Or even, you know, if they have a blessed unit, and not blessed unit, even if they have something with Astro, I'm sure like they can block it, but like what can go for 16,000, let's be honest. So yeah, Knight, I mean, its name is just so weird. Knight Alaya, that's a really good card, really good finisher for this deck. And then on to the next card, Winter Gloom, literally the main engine of the deck. I mean, I know we got Phantasmal Paradise, but Winter Gloom is just like such a major card for this deck. It offers really good offense, really good tempo, really good defense as well actually. So like you know the level 1, 2, and 3, it got the effect when it attacks if you spend so called use a magic card. You can draw a card, which is kind of the main thing about Winter Gloom. You know, it gets you the draw, and it gets the luster, so you can use a magic card, get your magic back, and you also get an additional draw. The level 2 effect might not see that much play, most of the time, but it is like really decent actually against like any kind of control matchups. Against aggro, you don't really expect to see any cost 6 or more. Against white aggro, you might see Dumb Diner or Frost Tiger, but then Frost Tiger has white armor, so Winter Gloom can't deal with it anyway. But like Dumb Diner kind of might be what Winter Gloom can be for. Against, you know, because like during either attack step, you just even play something like White Owl, you know, and then like you got Winter Gloom effect to just bounce the Dumb Diner to end. Green aggro can't really think of anything really. Like I think like cost 6 or more, and most of them are just like really low cost stuff. But like you know, just a really handy effect. When you want to use it, it kind of you know. That's the effect for you to use it. That's kind of like the gist for Winter Gloom. Just like a really solid draw engine. The maximum 7,000 also kind of can keep it quite on the field for quite a long time. The major part is also because it has like the jewel symbols, you know, being both yellow and white at the same time. So like that's some really decent reduction for a lot of the magic cards because like as you can see, Julia is also playing quite a lot of white magic cards. You know, it has a quite an interesting ratio. You know, most of the spirits are yellow, but then like most of magic are actually white. So like the reduction would definitely come in handy there. And we got 4 copies of Juigo. You know, nothing much to have to say about it. Just a really decent blessed unit. You know, level 3 effect. Your spirit with blessed and will be blocked by opponent's level 1 spirits, which unironically actually really good against aggro decks. Because most of the time aggro decks they kind of want it's kind of spread out everything at level 1 just so they can like attack a lot more times. So like when they do that, then you can just like summon Jewel Ego, and then like you don't have to worry about them blocking because they just cannot block. Obviously, like the effect also applies to other spirits with blessed. So if you can spam more blessed units on the field, Jewel Ego just becomes more and more useful. And then we got an interesting card here, 2 copies of Tawu. I'm not sure about the other list. I actually haven't really looked into the other Winter Gloom list. Julia chose to play Tawu for quite a lot of reasons. The main reason is the summon effect, which can basically stack your deck top. And this goes really well with Paradise, especially when you summon Tawu. You activate the summon effects first, check to make sure like what you're going to draw, and then you draw with Paradise. You know, it kind of guarantees cards that you want. You're looking like 3 cards deeper in, and then like you can choose from there which card you want to draw into. So like that part is really useful, especially for yellow, which like you know doesn't really draw a lot actually, because like unless you get Paradise, the draw isn't really that consistent because you know obviously you have Winter Gloom, but like that's still quite a lot of setup for you to just draw that one card. And it's very risky as well because like obviously you kind of what you're trying to bet on is like attack with Wonder Gloom, use a magic card, and you want to make sure that Wonder Gloom isn't removed as well, so that you can continue the thing and next turn. But with Paradise, obviously there's Nessus Destruction, but being a Nessus is also much easier to play it, and much easier to remain on the field because literally only Nessus Destruction can remove it. So like with Tower in there, it makes a lot of things like more consistent. Like even if you don't have to draw, you look at the free cards, then you like kind of stack what you're going to draw into in the future, just like plan ahead. That would also help. Obviously, the downside is that your opponent cannot see what you're going to draw into. Then you have the chain white. Yeah, so it cannot be selected by effects or opposing spirits until the end of their next turn. It's just like kind of like a mini immunity effect, which can come into handy sometimes. And especially against decks like purple, they have to select. Unless they're playing the curse combo, a lot of the summon effects, attack effects also have to select. So having the chain effect around also guarantees Tower to stick on the field, which is especially important because Tower also has luster. So that is the third reason why Julia plays Tower. I mean, obviously it's also a Fable Beast, so like that's another card for Paradise. But the main point is that it's a luster that cannot be touched. In terms of luster, just like adding kind of more cards in there, because obviously you only have 2 copies of Akalaya, but then you don't really want to play Akalaya really early on because it's your finisher. Kind of want to try to keep it in hand here, or at least 1 copy in hand until you're sure that you can finish the game. So your main attacker is usually Wonder Gloom, and whether it's for the draw, or you want to kind of abuse your magic cards. And Wonder Gloom is kind of what you try to go for as like a luster unit in the early game. So having 2 copies of Power in there really helps to like kind of push up the ratio of the luster spirits that you can use, and really good BP threshold as well. With only 2 cores, can put it to 5,000 BP. Only 3 cores to put it at 6,000. So like just a really good card in general. Really good stats. Pretty decent effects for like what Yellow wants to have. In terms of the Nessus lineup, we got 4 copies of Paradise and 3 copies of Steam Power Factory, and nothing much had to be said. And Paradise makes sense. It's literally the most consistent draw engine you can have in Yellow right now, and kind of goes in line with kind of the cost that you want to use anyway. Because obviously, again, Wonder Gloom and Tower Fable Beast, your luster deck, you kind of want to use them, and then you want to face against kind of like aggro decks. Then gaining life is also an important aspect of the deck. So you've got all the blessed units, where most of them Fable Beasts. So like Paradise, a very reasonable option in this deck. And then we got 3 copies of Steam Power Factory. And Julia actually debated if she wanted to go down to 2, because the thing is, when you put down 1, then the rest of the copies are like pretty much useless. But I suppose like in the end she decided to go for 3, just kind of in the middle ground, because you also kind of want to see it really early on. And in case you're facing against red decks and then like they constantly destroying your Nessuses, then you have like a few more copies to play. 4 copies are definitely too much though, I would say. So there's that. Only 7 Nessuses makes sense. Again, it's a BO1 facing like an aggro meta, so you don't really want a lot of Nessuses, especially in the first turn. You kind of want to place put down a spirit rather than a Nessus. And then in terms of magic lineups, there's also a few things that can be said. Ice Shield, obvious. White Out, pretty obvious. Just like a really cheap magic card for your luster to activate, especially for Wonder Gloom, for the draw and for the bounce effect at level 2 as well. And Whiteout itself also has an effect to bounce the cost for less spirit to the hand, which like works perfectly against aggro decks. 3 copies of Dream Bomb. I suppose like playing 4 copies might be too much, especially since when she's also playing Flush Stream. So basically, the concept is that if you already have other removal cards, then like cards that bounce to hand, like Dream Bomb and Whiteout, you don't really need a lot of them because they're not complete removal, if you get what I mean. You're kind of using them to delay a turn. You return the spirits to hand and then they can just summon it again next turn. So not 4 copies of Dream Bomb, only 3. I think it makes sense, especially since Dream Bomb also minimum 3 cost, which can be quite a lot for the early game, especially with this deck lacking quite a bit of white symbols unless you manage to get Pegasus on it or Steam Power Factory early on. Obviously, you can summon Wonder Gloom, but in early games, Wonder Gloom is actually pretty expensive, so that's not really the ideal card that you want to see in the early game. Dream Bomb, only 3 copies is okay. The 4 Flush Stream though, is definitely like an interesting choice, but it makes sense. She also explained to me. I mean, it's obvious enough. You're facing an aggro meta 4 flush four flush stream. Sorry, I cannot speak today. A 4 flush stream, extremely reasonable. Or 4 copies, obviously. Another thing is like guarantee that you can see it in the early game. It also means that after you spend quite a few copies of them as a defense, you can still have like few copies to use it as offense. Basically, using it with luster. So like if you know that they cannot remove your luster unit, just attack every turn, use the flush stream every turn. They cannot do anything. I mean aggro decks, control decks, another topic. But in terms of control, I suppose like for the deck, it focuses more on like trying to delay the turns until they have enough cores to do the layer plus snow melting like combo. When you have Astro, you can literally just ignore their board. So there's that. 2 copies of snow melting, like only 2 copies also makes sense. Because it's supposed to be like kind of your end game card, and it's not really something that you want to use in the early game, especially since it's like the effect itself is like almost completely for offense, because like the first effect is to select the spirit to not be blocked by cost 5 or less during the turn. you know, what can you do with it in terms of defense? And then the chain one is select one of your spirits with 1 symbol, refresh it. That effect might be useful in defense, but it's not really something that you want to rely on most of the time. So like, if you want to use a magic card for defense, suppression is way better for that. So like 2 copies of snow melting like kind of makes sense. You don't want to see it too early, and you don't want too many copies in hand, especially since in this deck the only combo that you really want to go for is with Arclair. Technically, when the Gloom or the Flower also works, but Arclair just like works so much better just because it has Astro. And then finally, we have 2 copies of Exhaust Nessus, just like another board wipe option. Only 2 copies makes sense because it is quite a hefty card. 7 minus 5, but most of the time you're not gonna have 5 reduction symbols. So yeah, just like 2 copies of it for the flash effect, just like reducing everything by 3000, which can clear out quite a lot of cards if your opponent is playing aggressively. The burst effect might come in handy as well, depending on how you want to surprise your opponent. Let's say like that you have enough cores now, and then that you kind of expect your opponent to play something like Valkyrie Mist, or like in like the green decks, maybe against something like Emerald Pincer, things like that, on Summon, Exhaust, and Opposing Spirit. They kind of have to play those cards to try to get around a lot of big blockers. And at that moment you can just activate Exhaust Nessus, kind of clear out their board a little bit, and like make sure they cannot make as many attacks as they were expected to. So yeah, so Exhaust Nessus is really decent choice in like a best of 1 meta. And then moving on to the side deck, 2 copies of Michaela. If I remember correctly, it's more for like the control matchups, or at least like any kind of slower matchups. Because like if you manage to put Michaela on the board at level 2, then like your flush stream, your snow melting light, your exhaust nessus, basically all your magic cards, use without cost, and it becomes really easy to abuse them. And obviously you also got the summon effect, which kind of helps you to dig faster for your magic cards. So in some cases it might even be useful against like aggro matchups, because you just want to have like a few cards that can help you dig your ice shield, flush stream, etc. Way quicker. And then 2 copies of Enterprise, it's just for the armor. What more can I say? Again, most likely probably for the white armor. The red armor might come in handy, but in Julia's case, I think like she's playing Enterprises more for the reasons of being offensive. Because this deck definitely feels more like a tempo deck. Obviously you got Pegasus on there, which is like more for blocking, but also with its level 2 effect, it means it allows you to attack while blocking as well. And obviously you got all the blessed units. If you don't attack with them, what are you doing? And then Luster, also same thing, you have to attack with them. So this deck is more of like a tempo deck rather than trying to stall by blocking. So like the Enterprise here is more maybe like to add in the more of like the defense option, also to give armor to all your blessed and luster spirits, just to make sure they can get the attack through. They can activate the luster and bless things like that. So the armor is more for protection against opposing magic effects, which in this case, actually all three color armor can come in handy. Red armor, they may play something like Burning Force or like the one copy of Volcanic Break, which can destroy 6,000 or less, which, in this deck, except for when the Gloom at max BP, or like Pegasione, the main cards that you want to attack with, they're all in the range of Volcanic Break. And so like, giving them red armor can be really handy against like this kind of magic card, or even like, things like Ritual Fire, which you would kind of expect people to be playing as well, because they would be expecting aggro matchups as well. So red decks would be playing Ritual Fire, shut them down at burst, and like, expect to like take 2 spirits with it. So like the red armor that can be really handy. Purple armor, all the magic cards, Doubly Deadly, Deadly Balance, Core Theft, things that Enterprise can prevent them. The most obvious white armor against Dream Bomb, things like that. Unfortunately, cannot escape the inescapable Avalanche. See what I did there? It is how it is. Like, Avalanche is designed to get through armor, so you cannot help with that. But I mean, if you're facing a deck that's using Avalanche, you probably would have the time to like set up again and do another attack anyway. And then we've got 3 copies of Steel Leaves, mainly for the level 1 effect, just to like deal with the red decks, all those kinds of Nessus destructions, because like Steam Fire Factory is just like really important for this deck. It gives the reductions for the magic cards, it provides both the yellow and white symbol, and then like the level 2 effect can also be really handy in some cases, like just like returning your luster effect, luster spirits to hand, your blessed spirits to hand, and just to make sure that you can repeat the same process in the next turn. So keeping Steam Power Factory on the field is really important. And so Forest of Steel List is here to do that, to perform that role. Like if you have a burst card set, your white Nessuses cannot be destroyed by red spirits or magic effects. And that works really well with this deck as well, because as you can see with the magic cards, you've got like 7, 11, 13 cards with burst. So you have, like, most of the time your white Nessuses are going to be protected. So Forest of Steel list is actually really decent for this list. And then obviously the level 2 effect, you can control the Nessuses a little bit as well. Imagine you got Steel Leaves at level 2, then you have Steam Power Factory at level 2 as well. You're recycling your spirits, and you're also disrupting their board by returning their Nessuses to hand. So just like a really good, arguably tempo card actually. So there's that. And then talking about burst, obviously we have 2 copies of God Slaying as well. Ironically, I feel like she might be playing for the burst effect as well. Because like, again, we're facing an aggro meta, so the burst effect might actually come in handy. Cause like, also because I remember we do have quite a few of purple yellow first lists as well. I don't think they play a lot of summon effects, but if you catch them doing that, then the burst effect can be really useful against them. But I think it's more mainly for the flash effect, which can be really good against control decks as well, because all your luster spirit, well, the luster spirits in this list are all pretty low cost actually. The lowest cost being 4. So say like, for example, if unfortunately they do have an Astral Spirit to block and is higher BP than Agalea, in that case you can just play God Slaying, and to like kind of guarantee the destruction, because let's be honest, if there's a spirit that's going to be higher BP than Agalea, it's most likely going to be higher cost than Agalea as well. So like, yeah, God Slaying can be really useful in these situations, or even like just for when the Gloom and Towel, which doesn't have any unblockable effects, as no Melting Light only prevents them from being blocked by cost 5 or less. So like, God Slaying is here perfectly to fit in the role where like Snow Melting Light couldn't cover. If they block anything with cost 6 or more, and when the Gloom couldn't bounce it, then you got God Slaying to make sure that you can activate your luster. And then finally, one more copy of Snow Melting Light, just like one more copy for the sake of consistency. And so yeah, this is the Yellow White Luster list by Julia Brown. Congratulations. So let's move on to the next list.